So to get started, I'm going to go in here to my Photoshop file. So this again, that link, that bit.ly link, so bit.ly/msdmc workshops, and then the Photoshop folder. And I'm going to start with this pod with skull down here at the bottom. So this is just an image that's got sort of a light object and a dark object. And I'm going to talk about levels with this, so we can sort of adjust those and try to get them to fit. And here what we can do is I'm going to click download over here, and it will download a copy of this into my downloads folder. I'm going to go into Photoshop and choose open. And I'll look in that downloads folder. I find my pod with skull here, and I'll click open. So this is a JPEG image, which means that it is just a flattened single layer image. You'll see over here at the side, in your layers palette, this is going to be very crucial in Photoshop. It's got a background layer and it's locked. If I were to grab my move tool and try to move this, it would, and my error is on a different screen. This is the error that I get. So it says that it's currently locked. You cannot move the background layer. And here I don't want to move it, because if we were to, so I'll say convert to normal layer. If you do move it out of the way, you get this transparent background here, and it's also cropping that image. To undo something in Photoshop, you can Control Z, and I think they've changed it recently to where you can press Control Z several times. It used to step backward and forward, now it just goes backward. But there's also this history panel, and this is going to be very important as we go through. I use it a lot. I try to make a lot of edits, and then I decide, no, I don't like any of those edits, so I want to go back to the way it looked before, or just go back to see what it looked like before to kind of get a comparison. But here I can click back to open, and that undoes the move function there. And right above your layers palette is where you have these adjustments. Now you can, so kind of before these adjustment layers came into play, you could go up here to image and adjustments, and this would basically apply an adjustment across the entire image. So in this case, for example, if I wanted to go into levels like we're about to talk about, I have this little levels tab, and then I can do things. So like looking at the skull here, so this is the lighter part of this picture. The histogram shows me the lights and the darks in the image and sort of the distribution of those. So I can see I don't have any solid white up here. So if I could bring this down, and what that will do is lighten the image. But I can stop before I see this little curve happening. And that means that I'm not eliminating any of these white pixels. So in this case, if I go in, and just to really make an example of this, if I pull this past this, you can see that what I've done now is I've sort of blown out these white pixels. So now I've lost detail in the skull area here, because I've moved this past those little levels there. So I start to then just have a blank white space. So you don't really want to do that. And then the same thing can happen with the blacks or the darks in here. So if I come in here, I can bring this in, and I can see as I start to increase this, so the areas like this, that basically just becomes solid black, and I lose the detail in that. But all this is doing, and you can also adjust your midtone, so I can sort of adjust the grays and maybe pull that in if I want to get a little bit more contrast on the background. And if I do it this way, so again, I went to image, adjustments, and then levels, and then I click OK, then that just applies it to this image. And in order to adjust this, I would either have to go back into levels, which then I'm doing levels on top of levels, which is not great. Or I would have to go to my history palette and undo this. And if I were to save this JPEG, then it would overwrite the original one, and this would be now my permanent copy. So I'm going to show you an alternate version of that. So if I go back to open here, so I get rid of that levels there, which again, you could click back and forth and sort of see if you like that adjustment. But I'm going to show you using the adjustments layer. I can click on, this is my levels icon here. And this gives me another layer that then is applying everything to the background layer. So I can make those same adjustments here. So I'm just going to bring in the whites and the blacks and then adjust my midtones a little bit. And when we get that to about where we like it, we're good. We don't have to hit apply or anything else. We've just adjusted the way this layer looks. And if I use the little eyeball here, I can turn this on and off, and I can see that I haven't damaged the background layer. And so this is called non-destructive editing. So when you use these layers, you can always go back and make changes. I also want to show you that in your layers palette, so I've got two different things. I've got my options for the levels. So again, and there is actually this auto here. We'll see. It actually is pretty close to what I did, not to brag, but I've also done this a couple of times. So the auto, I adjusted it. It disagrees with me where the midtone should be, but you can sort of see how you feel about that. But I could look at this and say, all right, I like these adjustments here in the middle, but it's making the corners of this a little bit too dark. So what I could do is I could come in here and I could select this mask here. And what the layer mask does is anything that is white here means that the levels are being applied to the whole image. So I can say the whole mask is white here. But if I come in here, I could then decide, could even, that won't work here. So let's go in and I'm going to stick to what my plan was originally. In the mask layer, you can paint with either white or black. And again, white will apply or sort of show through, and then black will sort of block the level effect here. So I'm going to move over here to my toolbar, and you can see I've got white and black as my colors. You can swap those with this little arrow here. So I can swap them here. That's also X on the keyboard. So if I just hit the letter X, it will swap those back and forth. It's just a nice little shortcut. And then I need a brush, so I can click on my brush tool here. And when we're working with brushes, we have up here at the top this little brush menu. And this will let me change the size and the hardness of the brush. Now, in this case, if I move over here, this is a fairly large image. So I can see my little 13 pixel brush is just a tiny little dot. Make sure I'm doing that right. Yeah. So I could increase the size of this, and I typically just sort of pick a number and then move over to the image and then see how big that brush looks. There's also a shortcut that I think is very helpful, and it's the square bracket keys, which are underneath your backspace key. So if I hold the brackets, oh, I had my cursor in the size here. Let me undo that. Let me escape. There we go. So don't have your cursor there. So let's just click away from that. Let's close this. If I move over here to my image and then I use my square brackets, you can see that this will increase and decrease the size of that brush. I'm kind of in a spot where you can't really see it. So you can increase and decrease that here. And I want just kind of a really big brush that I can sort of brush over these corners and remove some of that leveling. And I do want to make sure that the hardness here, so if I were to do something here, and I'll do it just kind of drastically across the middle here, painting with the wrong color. So that's a really drastic change here. So a large, very hard edge brush, you're going to see the edge very clearly. So that's not what I want to do there. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that. And then I'm just going to go in and change the hardness. And then again, I'm just, for an example, just going to go across the middle again. And you can see that, especially you can maybe see it on the pod a little bit better. It's a very light, just sort of transition that it removes the layers there, or sorry, the levels there. So now what I can do is sort of just paint over these corners and lighten those up. And now if you look over here at my levels, and I believe if you hold Alt and click on your mask, you can see this is basically what I did. So I just painted sort of black in these areas. This also helps. I can sort of see if I want to make sure that that's more of a smooth transition. I can sort of adjust this a little bit. And if I hold Alt and click on that again, um, now I've got those sort of feathered edges just in those corners, but I'm still getting the levels on the center part of that image. And so turning the visibility on and off for that layer, you can kind of see how that looks. So let's go with another adjustment layer and just see some of the other things that we can do. So if I look back into my folder here, I'm going to go back to my pictures and I'm going to grab, I'm going to do the Etsy Studio header here. So this has got just a bunch of different yarn and things like that, and they're doing some crafts. And I'm going to download this, go back to Photoshop, and I'm going to do File, Open. Find in my Downloads folder the Etsy Studio header here. Click Open. And then I'm going to click back to, you can see now my brush is very large because this is a much smaller resolution picture here. And I'm going to go over here to my adjustments again so I can pick my adjustment layer. And I'm going to do the black and white layer here. So I'm going to click on this black and white, which is just looks like black and white here. So I can click on that. And this is a really interesting tool. So if I go in here and I decide that I want to adjust different parts of this, and this is was sort of eye-opening to me when I started using Photoshop. I just thought that you could just desaturate a picture and that was turning it to black and white. But in this case, you can actually adjust basically the exposure of the different colors here. So the reds, and I'm going to click the little eyeball here so we can hide that and see. So let's say, for instance, the reds. So I've got some red here and up here, and it may count some of these here in the middle, and maybe the pink. I'm going to turn that back on. If I adjust the reds here, so if I make those darker, you can see that those areas of the picture actually become darker. That's actually picking up some skin tones I can see. I could take the magentas and make them darker, and then this ball of yarn over here really gets kind of dark. I could make the blues lighter, and you can see that that adjusts those there. Maybe the cyans too, so if I really want to get some distinct black and white here. The yellow is mostly adjusting the tea or whatever is in this cup here at the top. But you can go in and manipulate those. You can also, if you're not sure, if you're looking at this and you don't remember, and I'm actually just going to reset this so we're back to where we started. So that's that little reset right here. I can also use this little finger. I'm not exactly certain what it's called, the finger or scrubber. And what this will let me do is actually just move over to the picture. And I could say, if I want, let's say, this yarn right here, which is, I remember being kind of a pinkish. If I want that to be darker, I can click and then just start dragging left and right. And then it's going to take everything that is in that color range and I can see. And so I'm moving here on the image. But if you look over at the properties, it's adjusting the reds. So I've grabbed a piece of red here. I could also just come in here and keep finding things to darken until I get that looking the way I want it to. Or if you don't like doing that, so again, I'm going to reset again, you can change this preset, and I have these different options sort of preset in here. So if I want a blue filter, that will make the blues a little bit lighter. So if I hide that, sort of see that. Maximum black, it's going to take everything pretty dark. You can see that's just kind of applied across the board here. So lots of cool things that you can do with black and white. And then the other thing, and I'm going to leave it, we'll just leave it on auto. Oh, sorry, I wanted to mention the tint. So I could actually make this black and white and then apply a tint. And so by default, it gives you kind of a sepia tone, but you can click on this little color swatch here, and I could come in. And so if I'm doing this, if I'm like maybe making, if this is a crafts workshop that we're hosting here in the library, I could come in and find a maroon color, which I have this written down, thankfully. So if I do 93, 23, 37, that's close to our maroon, which of course kind of comes out pink when you lighten it up. But then that gives it a tint that I could then put behind some text, or I could start making a design on top of this. And so we'll kind of go with that for now. And you can always turn it on and off. So you can just decide, yes, I want to apply the tint, or no. And I'm actually going to turn it off for now because I do want to show you, I guess we can leave it on. We'll see what happens. So here in the black and white, so talking about the layer mask again, I could go in and with the, so again, everything is selected. So everything is white right now. But if we go back and grab our brush, and I have black selected as my foreground color, if I paint over anything in here, it will actually bring color back to this. So like if I paint, and I realized that I picked the pink, which it already kind of is pink. So let me go over here and remember where some different colors are. So there I just did a little splash of that color. Here we've got the blue. So I wanted to pull that in. And again, I'm being fairly indelicate with this and just kind of making some changes here. But again, everything, it's non-destructive. So if I go back and I decide, so let's say I do something real bad like this, I can always flip back to the white brush and then just paint back over that area, and it will bring that tint back to it. I can then just kind of adjust that. And you can be more specific with this. So I could come in, so I've just been using brushes. Again, I'm fairly heavy-handed with a lot of my edits here. Wrong color, black, like that. So I could do this with all of them if I wanted to come in. If you want to get more specific with your selections, I could actually use one of these selection tools. So for example, up here at the top, a rectangular marquee or a elliptical marquee. So if I wanted to, and let me just get rid of, so let's say these little balls up here at the top. So if I come up here, I could draw an oval around this and move that into place a little bit. And I could then use edit and fill with either the foreground or the background color, or white or black. You could do the same thing here. So if I fill this with the foreground color, that would be black, so that would take it out of the mask. And then I get, if I press Control D, a really nice sort of clean circle here. So just depending on how you want to do it, you can also, if you use your lasso tool, you could sort of draw, I can't draw with the mouse very well, sort of draw a shape. And then I could press edit, fill, do foreground color. It'll sort of grab that shape. So you can do lots of different things with that. Again, I typically just go for the brush and then sort of add to and then remove as I see fit. So it's just adding some color. So now let's go in and look at just a few more things. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to now download. We'll do the box and field here. These are two images together. We'll kind of play around with these. And here I'm going to click download here at the top. Go back to my Photoshop program and go File, Open. And do boxes and field. Click Open here. So with this, I want to show you another slight thing that you can do. Um, so going in and let's say that we wanted to either more heavily saturate these images or um, change the hue or kind of get a different sepia tone. So instead of going black and white, what we can do is go in and I'm going to add a hue and saturation. Now the whole thing, so everything is selected here. If I change the hue and saturation, you can see that it gives us kind of psychedelic effects here. So just shifts all of the hues at the same time, either down the spectrum or up the spectrum. There's also, let me reset that. There's also the saturation where I can then, this is where I was talking about, this is what I sort of thought making a picture black and white was just taking all of the color out of it. But again, we saw that there's a lot more detail that you can do with that. And same thing with, let me hit reset. Same thing with lightness. So this will sort of either wash out or just darken the entirety of the image. And there is another colorize, so you could do, and the way this one works, instead of selecting a color, you're using the HSL color, so hue, saturation, and lightness. And so I could just adjust this and get different colors out of this. And I've done it several ways. Sometimes I will just jump into this just to get kind of make a picture match a certain theme that I'm working on in a different design. So you can easily do that. But I want to show you that you could then come in and we can sort of isolate different parts of this image. So both of them, and they're probably kind of opposite here, but I'm going to use a gradient instead of just using the brush to sort of isolate different parts of this. You can use a gradient tool inside your mask to let the adjustment sort of fade from one section to another. So in this case, I'm going to focus on the field here. So if I wanted to maybe have black and white toward the top and then fade into color toward the bottom, I will probably do this backwards the first time. I always do. I believe this is fading from foreground to background. So foreground is black and background is white. So it should start with the foreground up here, which is black, and so I actually want to do it this way. Hopefully I caught myself correctly. And with the gradient tool, you can decide. So I'm going to start kind of right here and click and drag to about here. And if you hold shift, it will keep this in 45-degree increments. So I go left and right or up and down. So I'm going to go from about here to here. And so now you can see it's applied this. Again, where it's black is where the hue is not going to change, and where it is light is where it is going to change. So if I, in this case, so instead of doing black and white, like I said, if I wanted to overly saturate the sky, so if I wanted to make the sky a little bit bluer, but not really affect what's in the foreground, you can see there. Also over here with the boxes, it really saturated the top part with the wood. So now it's a deeper red, and that's maybe too much. Which that kind of works. And again, this is working with two pictures at once. But remember too, I could really saturate. So if I really like that for the sky, I could then come back and even with either with a brush or I'll just do it with the brush. I don't have to have the opacity at full, so I could take that to maybe 50%. We'll make this really broad brush here. And this would actually let me just sort of dodge a little bit of that red. So I could come in here and just get rid of that. And if you look at, let's turn on that mask here. So this is kind of what that looks like. So I applied that gradient so that the saturation is just happening in the white area. And with this brush, I just sort of came in and just added with the opacity at about 50%. I could maybe take some of that back out. So it's just limiting it a little bit where it's not affecting that side as much. And again, that's Alt. You hold down Alt and click on the mask and you can sort of see what that looks like. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm available and I will be happy to help. Thank you very much for coming today. And if you don't have any questions, that is it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks.